Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and lore, sky and star, earth and embodiment through astrology, art, and spirit engagement. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. Okay, hello and welcome. We have with us today Bonnie. I've never said your last name. Can I say your full name?
Sure.
Kristen Kavanaugh Rapucci, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever said your full name on the show, but what's interesting is that you contain my whole name in your name, which I think is pretty weird, you know?
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I was like...
And then we also have, can I say your full name?
Yeah.
Suzanne Bell Stone. Hello, Suzanne.
Hello.
This is, you've listened to these Herbal episodes before. You know who the cast of characters is, but we're doing something different today where we've opened it up to my Patreon supporters as the live meeting that we do every month. But we're recording it, so the technology is a little different. It might sound weird, and sorry, things are changing on the screen as I was saying that. The Mercury retrograde might really be screwing with, and we're in eclipse season, and everything just looks and sounds really strange on the program, on the webinar program, and the computer's acting really slow. There might be background noise, and there might be we might drop out. There might be a bad connection. So just bear with us and just ride this Mercury retrograde recording. But yeah, we're here to talk about herbs and the month of July, and especially about your herbal forecast that you wrote. Do you want to, Suzanne, just kind of introduce the plants that we're hanging out with?
Yeah. Was drawn to lunar ruled purple loosestrife, Luthrium salicaria, a beautiful wetland dweller who is villainized throughout this country. And as well as Oxeye Daisy, another villain. Leucanthemum vulgare is the name, meaning little common white flower. Both ruled by the sun and the moon. Actually, it's open while the moon is out as well. And then later on, or kind of throughout the whole month, St. John's Wort or St. Joan's Wort, depending on who you are wanting to talk about at that moment. Hypericum perforatum. Fiery sun, Leo, like absolute beautiful bright yellow flowers, and when you touch them and you get blood red on your hands. It's just, those are the three allies I've chosen for the month. Yeah,
really good choices. There's a couple of things that through them that I thought were really profound. One that they're villains, and that this time period, the astrology is pretty heavy and wicked, and that they're helpful for us, but they're also in tune with like the villainous nature of the configurations and transits right now. That like you get Saturn and Pluto and the South Node. And last month, we had Mars on the North Node near Rahu, but we get Rahu and the Sun on the other end this month, but we also get Mars still being prominent by being conjoined to Mercury as Mercury stations retrograde. So we get the malefics in full effect, and so we get these beautiful and amazing and helpful plants that on other registers have, like context to what the astrology is a might be causing in our lives, but also that they're seen as villains in by some, so they're a good crew.
Yeah, they're really good crew. Yeah.
Yeah, the other things about them that I thought were interesting is it's an eclipse season, so the focus on being good for the eyes, and K2's effects of purging often end up causing or being wrapped up in things surrounding the bowels,
Yeah.
and so it seemed like each plant had some sort of relation to like Loosestrife supports the bowels in general, and that area of the body is one of the things that it's helpful for, and then also the St. John's wort being helpful with protecting against E. coli.
Yeah.
And then also like Daisy supports the bowels as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I like how both purple loosestrife and Oxeye Daisy are both transformers of the soil.
Oh yeah.
It felt really akin with Saturn and Pluto, just kind of looking for like judgment cards or something, like what have you done and what are you facing now because of your actions?
Like, what have you done?
What have you done?
I was wondering, because you're talking about, the like invasive in quotes, and I really love like your thoughts on like so-called invasive, and if you could suggest any good reading about that topic.
Yeah, 3 books I've read this winter. One's called The New Wild by Pearce, who's an environmental journalist. Really fascinating. Went all around the world just studying what he calls novel ecosystems. Just kind of talking about how dynamic our Earth is and how nothing stays the same ever. Cloud. So that's a really amazing read. And then Beyond the Wort on Invasive Species by Tao O'Brien. This person has worked in a lot of restoration work, which usually ends up being spraying a bunch of poisons on the earth and different plants. And I think this person got exceedingly distraught by that, and is also a permaculturist, so really started looking how is the problem the solution, and what are these plants offering, and what messages are they bringing. And then the last one, I think I have to think about it. Oh, Invasive Plant Medicine by Timothy Scott. Really great, just going into the politics and the economics of invasive species, as well as the amazing medicine that all of these plants are providing, and habitat and information.
Can you for people that might not know what we're talking about at all right now, can you just kind of reiterate some of their ideas and your ideas about all invasive species, and why that Daisy and purple loosestrife in particular are like some eyes, like in maybe like the golf course industry's eyes.
Right? Yeah. Well, I remember in, I think, the mid-90s, like seeing purple loosestrife and saying, "Oh, what a gorgeous flower that is," and someone was like, "Oh, that's an invasive species," and I was like immediately, "Oh, that's bad." And so we're really ingrained to have that feeling. And then purple loosestrife came from Eurasia to the Americas, probably in the ballast of ships. maybe in some wool, like some seeds of wool, and then really naturalized quite readily. And even in the late 1800s, botanists actually thought they were native to here because they were so naturalized.
Oh, wow.
I love that part.
Yeah. And people have been concerned. They think that purple loosestrife is completely taking over wetland areas. And more studies are coming out that really in places where humans have completely just demolished the land, then purple loosestrife will completely move in and be a transformer of the land. But in other places, other plants are allowed to kind of grow with purple loosestrife. And people have been finding out that purple loosestrife is cleaning the water of nitrogen and phosphorus, which are strongly in our pesticides and herbicides, and just running off from our golf courses, from our lawns, from our schools, from everything into the water systems. So people are concerned because there's so many of them, they're so tenacious and have such vitality. And people get concerned about things not being the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think
Where things come from.
of like part of the whole, what I think we're really at the corner of, like, you know, with like the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions and how we're about to switch into all air signs in 2020. And we're closing out this whole 200-year like Earth sign conjunction period since 1802. And with this Saturn like hierarchy, like in Capricorn, I'm just saying like signifiers like hierarchy and structure and foundation and the past and our history, etc. With Pluto there and with K2 there, it'd be like, oh, we gotta like clear this shit out. We gotta clear out like the garage, the basement. You know, we gotta clear out the house. All this, what's all this stuff? You know, and as you clear out that stuff, you're like, oh, that's my, you know, my broken motorcycle helmet. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, these things that you're attached to. In that analogy, and just in general, just being like classic cars, like, you know, the like things that were still are hot, you know, to be like, ooh, sexy, like an old car, you know, but that we're kind of like we're nostalgic about having to be like, yeah, you got to stop caring about that, or we got to let it be the past because this is like we can't go on like this. This stuff is destructive, you know, and that part of that nature of just being of where our relationship to the future and past needs to be reckoned with, you know, where we're like, you know, not everything from the past is valuable because it's from the past, and or like should be preserved because it's from the past. Not that we should let it, we should delete it. Like we should definitely preserve the knowledge of everything, but that like that what you're saying about like, oh, this is purple loosestrife is taking over these certain areas because it's very well adapted to it, but it's doing positive things for the landscape, and it doesn't make sense to spend energy fighting it if it's like perfectly happy living there, but that it's changing things that that we're like can't deal with that change, you know, that we were like, oh, we don't want to see this not look like the way it used to look. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's part of a greater dynamic that of something that it could teach us. You know, that we're like, but like our ability to image the future and responsibly is also out of whack. You know, that we're like, I was talking the other night about how quickly we've gone from like decade, you know, just like decadism. You know, just being like 60s, the 70s,
Yeah.
the 80s, and like how fast we're willing to kind of just be like, oh, that's been done. Like it was all about like, let's do something new, really. And that like we couldn't really become traditional. Nothing could become a tradition because it was like, oh, someone already did that like a few weeks ago. Now, like, just try to do something that's never been done, like continually, rather than developing something that has weight, you know.
You were saying that like so many things could never be fully realized
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, no, it was never like a complete sentence or a fully fleshed out idea. It was just a lot of like
thoughts in the dark.
Yeah, a lot of like really young, like juvenile expression over and over. It's like beginner's luck. It's like sexy, you know, like but that these plants also like, I don't know. I was just thinking about like them helping us be like, no, this is where we anchor into the past, and this is where we kind of like move with dynamism into the future, you know, rather than just kind of constantly deleting the past, but also being nostalgic for certain things that we won't let, like clinging to certain things with our, you know, what is like the NRA thing with our like clutching it with our cold dead
you can
hands.
Cry it from our cold dead hands. Yeah.
You know, like that we're like
Charleston Heston.
Yeah, that we like we won't let go these certain archetypes, and especially certain industrial technologies that like we still think are just like hot and sexy, you know, and the archetypes that go with them. And I mean, I'm like a victim of it as much as anyone. I like motorcycles, I like guitars, you know, like I like loud music, like it all takes energy, you know. But just watching how these plants kind of take over and flourish, and I'm not so sure how much the other plants are unhappy that they're invading or invasive, or if they're all in some sort of equilibrium together, or they like one is bowing to the other or something. If that makes sense.
Constant forming of new equilibrium, just like in our lives, we can't expect ourselves to be exactly like we were in our 20s or in our 30s or whatever.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to be there, you know. It's a different way of being. I can't see how we expect that of the earth to not.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's a lot about trusting the earth and saying, why are these plants taking over so much? Oh, because we've been treating the earth really poorly in certain areas, and these plants are healers for me. Coming in with and have a broader view than a human timeline. And we only live, 70, 90 years, very long. It's such a small glimpse of a broader view that could be happening.
Yeah, and I like that they're doing a service to the places that they're invading or whatever, you know, and that like very much with back to the astrology of right now and why you chose them, like that, you know, that K2 is doing some hard stuff to us, especially like amped up. Amped up is maybe not the right terminology for it, but made more like serious and drastic by being in proximity to Saturn and set by dignity as well as Pluto. That it's like K2 is trying to clear out the stuff that's harmful or stuff that's like making us ill.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a hard process, you know, like that's like it's painful.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's people are adamant about these plants. I mean, in Maine, a new Maine invasive species guide just came out recently. Each page tells how to poison like hundreds of plants. Every page tells about how to poison them. It's
so crazy.
And since 1973, it's been the same process, and there's been no success.
Yeah.
With this action, obviously. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Yeah, just the mindset needs to change too. It's fascinating to me. It's very controversial.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But it makes so much sense. And it's just like those, it's just the earth taking care of itself. And I think that it will do that with or without us, but it's like, it's just, I love that ability for it to regenerate itself. Just like that, like, you guys remember like the gypsum factory in Philly, like how it was just like there's just all these plants growing in there, and even though like it had just been destroyed and it had just been like stamped, like all nature had been destroyed, and now like it was back, and that is the ultimate victory of nature.
You're just blowing through the pavement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It also makes me think of like narratives of colonization, and imperialism, and being like,
it's imperialist.
Just being like, oh, you're from over there. What are you doing here? You like you don't belong here. You're from that other place, and
it fits completely what's going on the southern border right now of this country. Of just like it's
just being like you're an invasive species, like, but like,
and not considering like what the benefits of like.
Or just allowing things to be dynamic, just allowing for equal, like trusting that there things can seek an equilibrium and facilitating in that,
You were talking about that today about ideas and like crystallized ideas, the danger of crystallized ideas. And,
totally.
And that this is really related.
Yeah, I was talking today, and a lot. It's like one of my like four subjects that are on my like constant like. I don't know, mental shelf or something. Like one is my disdain for opinions.
Right. Opinion.
Not my disdain, because that sounds too opinionated, but I just like, that. I don't know, that in place of like opinions, being like, I think this, like that. Now that we can't trust any, or that we probably never could have ever trusted any news source. And that just that never existed, to be like, oh, news has gotten really fake and manipulative now. Be like, oh no, that's probably always the case. Just that we overinflated objectivity in like the rationalist mania, that began in around 1700, and that we just thought we could just like, and you see this a lot with like, I guess we started the conversation talking about like.
The Atlantic.
What's it about the Atlantic?
The magazine.
Oh, the magazine, The Atlantic. But about like the corseted like Victorian era and like trying to be non-emotional, and that that women weren't allowed to vote because of menstruation, and that like hysteria, that they can control their emotions, and that men, in the rationalist enlightenment. You would, if you were showing any emotion, someone else would be like, "What's wrong with you, man? Quit your blubbering?" Like that. Your rational mind was being infected by the fact that you were experiencing any sort of emotion at all, and you were supposed to keep it under wraps, and that, I don't know, having an ability to be coherent of a lot of ideas in a bigger pattern simultaneously, but also allow in subjectivity and to a degree, and an emotional impact, being aware of emotional impact, so that things that are like solely based on statistical information don't run away with themselves, where you're like, oh, this is a good idea because we've run the numbers, but like if we all sat with it, we'd be like, I don't know, that just doesn't feel right, like I just don't like the feel of that, and that imagine like, I don't want to say governing bodies, because I think we need to lose the whole political paradigm completely, like eventually, but people who facilitate cultural behavior being like, does it, yes, but does it feel good? Does it feel okay? Like,
exactly.
And I think that's, watching the way people act and move and the way plants act and move, you can learn from that, but also like moving into that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in air signs, which is likely going to prefer networks over hierarchies, as we've seen from historical precedents. This is like the same period of like that, the Black Plague like breaks up monasticism, and also the time period where we, like after Alexander's death, and empire quickly breaks up into into like city states, many city states basically, and everyone's, because of his activity, everyone's speaking Greek. So information is being dispersed widely, and it's a lot of smaller bodies of cultural cellular structures that all can interact. And so these air sign periods like for dynamism, and I don't know. So it just seems like that you have Pluto right on top of Saturn, right on top of Ketu, and this what's going down in the southern border of the U.S. is like the astrology clearly says like no, things like borders in that sense have to go. It's we're, like we need something more dynamic and flexible than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, ranting and raving.
Good rant.
As usual.
That purple loosestrife comes from the idea of dissolving strife, and
yeah.
like this eclipse period is, and Mercury retrograde is full of challenge and probably strife along with that. So a great ally during that time period.
I know, and also it's so appropriate now for because you said that it helps discourage biting insects, and that's like obviously a problem for anybody who wants to be outside in the evenings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's like go that direction for a little while and go deeper into the plants in turn.
I mean, it's so cool. You only chose 3 plants, and I just feel like
I thought that was
each one is like so laden with meaning for you, and for this like I really like the succinctness of it. So I mean, if you want to jam on the plants for a while, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Going back to like before, kind of set us off. Going back to what you said about like the insects at night and purple loosestrife, being like a marsh, plant. Like bell pepper, I saw that he says, "Smoke hereof being bruised drives away flies and gnats, which in the nighttime molest people inhabiting near marshes and in the fenny countries." Which I just thought is like hilarious to think about, like that the insects are like their agenda is to molest us.
By perception.
Yeah, I feel like that sometimes.
Like you want to give us purple loosestrife.
Yeah. One thing I think is really wonderful about all 3 of these plants is that they are so tenacious and so vital that we can call upon them for medicine a lot more freely than a lot of our other plants. For example, eyebright, which is an at-risk plant.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know either.
Yeah, just too much. And then it's even said in some of the literature that purple loosestrife is possibly even stronger for eye health than and so we don't really have to worry about over harvesting. I mean, always harvest with thoughtfulness in honor, but it's just something. Even in the United Plant Savers Journal, this spring 2019 journal, they're writing about purple loosestrife and saying how we need to start maybe hiring herbalists to go out and experiment with making medicine with this purple loosestrife, and just start seeing, like testing or just experimenting with ourselves with it, and finding out even more of the medicine that's offering.
It's a good perspective for like plants that are that require no farming, that are abundant. Be like, okay, well, like, what's the most we can get out of them,
Yeah. This plant is a single rootstock covering many square feet, 30 to 50 stalks sent up 8 feet tall, and one plant producing 2 million seeds in one season. Like, this is a vital plant.
It's interesting because like in magic, you see often like if you want something to like to go everywhere,
Yeah.
you pour it into running water, you know, and that they're
Yeah.
they're common along rivers. Like
Yeah.
Culpepper mentions, like riversides and ditches, and along the the area of the Lambeth, which I wasn't familiar with, but I looked up, and it's like a district in central London along the Thames. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you're like, oh, I want this to go widespread. Put it in a river.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the amazing quality of taking toxins out of the soil, lead, PCBs, and also when a plant is offering that to the earth, often when we take it inside our bodies, often a similar is offered if it's if we're able to take it in, you know, if it's not toxic to us, which it isn't.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because like Culpepper says that with the eye bright thing as well, that he says like it's really good for sight outwardly and with eye bright inwardly. Like it's like, and he says like that it clears dust and other stuff out of the eyes, and is like it supports the crystalline humors if they not be perished or hurt. And I looked up, I was like, the crystalline humors, I'd never heard that before. And then I looked it up, and that refers to like the lens of the eye, which is amazing. But that like, you know, it like clears stuff out of the eye, and it clears stuff out of the soil, but it replaces like poisoned areas with like natural beauty, you know, like it's easy on the eye. Like, well,
Yeah.
you know, I posted some pictures more of like landscape than just the land itself, and you can kind of see what it looks like in a landscape, you know.
Yeah, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And also just the idea of bringing helping to clear toxicity out of your home, out of your relationships. Toxicity is coming towards you, maybe Purple Loosestrife being an ally there during this time when emotions can be running really high, and
Yeah.
Mars and Leo can really be like send those emotions
Yeah.
straight towards somebody. And it's a wonderful immune supporting herb. You know, a lot of our wetland plants, I mean, they know how to live in boggy scenarios, and boggy scenarios in our body can be congestion and just like not clear-headed. And so a lot of these plants are able to help with that aspect of our own selves. And that it's astringent, so it's toning tissues at the same time it has mucilaginous, so it's moistening at the same time as toning. So that's a beautiful aspect.
I noticed that about like, seems like all three of the herbs that you suggested, sort of like, you know, purple loosestrife is, Culpepper has it as like an herb of the moon in Cancer, you know, so they're like they like jive with the watery humor and the watery like elemental quality, like the triplicity, but that they also like tone that quality, like they don't clash against it, like it's not like drying it out to bring heat to the wet, but like bring things in balance. It's like wet on wet, but in a way that it like it like qualifies it or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does feel really Cancerian. Just the love of beauty in the home, the love of like toning the home, you know, making it a really beautiful place, being thoughtful about it, and yeah, beauty. It just feels like, and purple loosestrife is just gorgeous. So just it feels really fitting for Cancer, lunar Cancer.
Yeah, it's really great what you were saying too about it being good for clarity, as this is Mercury retrograde in a water sign, and this is the second Mercury retrograde in a water sign, and then we're going to get it retrograde in Scorpio later in the year, and so we're starting to see like because it's happened before. Obviously, Mercury goes through the triplicities, but we're getting our current dose of what it's like when Mercury's retrograde in water signs.
Yeah.
And the last one was just so brutal because it was in Pisces in Mercury's fall and in Mercury's detriment. But Jupiter was in rulership in Sagittarius, and Mercury's in retrograde in his other rulership in Pisces. So it's like, oh well, it'll be assisted in that way. And I think that is true to a degree. Like this, I keep saying this kind of like you get so lost, you find yourself with something better than what you were originally looking for. But all the same, it's like being so confused, so confused where like thought, like analysis and ability to organize your mind is completely like drowned in emotional confusion, So this being like in that state, being like, oh my God, I remember back in March being in the depths of that Mercury retrograde in Pisces, being like, oh my God, I wish I could just like grab onto some sort of buoy or life. What are they called? Those like
Life ring?
those donuts that they throw out in the water.
Preserver?
Life preserver. Yeah, and like
A lifesaver.
yeah, and like have someone with like a lamp and a boat, being like over here.
Right.
Like finding some like the team of people that rescue you while you're swimming in the darkness. And this is like purple loosestrife. If you're in like a marshy, wet, like fucked up situation, be like being like, oh, there's someone there that it's their realm and they can help you work through it,
Below the wrist or something, just like the glow of the marsh that people will follow sometimes for guidance.
Did you read anything about like the king's evil? Did you encounter that?
No.
So purple loosestrife is one that I saw in Culpepper that he says it's a good rinse and gargle for mouth and throat, and can help with what they call the king's evil. And I was like, oh, what's that? And I looked it up, and it's king's evil is what they referred to. It's also known as like scrofula, or the disease is actually. I don't know if it's a disease or a virus or what, but it's tuberculosis cervical lymphadentis, and it's like affects the lymph nodes on the neck, and would be these big, huge, kind of like crazy malformations and ulcers like on the neck, and that the royal touch is that like monarchs in Britain and France especially would they would touch people in the populace, and because of their divine right to rule, that they were could heal like whatever ailed you. Like it's like a laying of the hands, but that specifically this Rafula, or the king's evil, was healed by like that, the monarch touching his subjects, but also Culpepper notes like. And purple loosestrife is good for that too.
Oh wow!
But it's good even for that,
That makes sense. And I love how bees just love the purple loosestrife, obviously, and beekeepers have been drawn to the purple loosestrife honey as a really delicious honey.
Yeah, I was really like just almost salivating at the thought of that, just getting this like super medicinal honey. I mean, obviously honey it is medicine in itself, but then to like add this purple loosestrife to it, it's just crazy.
I was reading about this beekeeper who had was selling purple loosestrife honey because with bees will focus on one plant for a period of time, and then if you harvest that becomes that plant's honey. But some people were angered that this person was even advertising as purple loosestrife honey because this is a so-called invasive species. So it's just like, this is beautiful medicine, and you're angry about this medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's interesting that its roots creep. Like it says, like Culpepper says, the roots creep similar to couch grass, and we're talking about that, like how it moves on the landscape, but that it also it's came across on boats, and like I like how you even said it came across by being preferred by beekeepers. Like that was just people's intentions brought it across, but it's a plant that gets around, which makes sense for a lunar plant, but that it and a Venusian plant too. Like you're attracted to it; it's attractive, but that
You want to have it with,
yeah, totally. You want to have it on your arm,
yeah.
but like, but that it I lost track of my thought there. Oh yeah, but that it and something that moves that way underground also is like an invasive plant, or like quote unquote invasive plant.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so to our next villainous invasive plant. What about a daisy?
Talk about daisies.
Oxeye Daisy.
Oxeye daisy.
Love, its old botanical name was Chrysanthemum leucanthemum, which is gold flower, white flower.
Oh, right.
Of the sun and the moon, both aspects carry. I love how this herbalist I like to read mentioned making a flower essence with the sun of Oxeye Daisy and made one with the moon light. And then the two were just completely different entities, but just really powerful, beautiful medicine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that, like that it, the way it's used, like in like practice with like he loves me not, or like boy girl boy girl boy girl, like whether or not you're going to have like a boy or a girl child, or I like this one too, like the what kind of husband you'll have, like nobleman, beggar man, city man, farmer, soldier, king, emperor, leader, like.
I used to do a jump rope song like that.
Yeah.
Like, beggar man, thief, doctor, lawyer. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I
so,
know.
No, I know the
Like jump thing.
Right. Yeah, but just that, like you're saying, like with like that, its name, and then using it as like can be lunar or solar. It carries this kind of binary nature, like one or the other.
Yeah, I love how it carries both the luminaries. It's so beautiful. It's just like will carry the light. And I love how it's also called ghouls and grandmothers and honored, associated with Artemis, goddess of the moon, and then of course with Saint Mary Magdalene and Saint Margaret, and then seen as kind of thunder daisy, with Artemis's ability to talk Zeus out of maybe throwing some thunderbolts.
Yeah.
And then amazing how even during Henry the sixth time in England, there were punishments for daisies in fields because that would be neglected land, or Scotland. If the ghouls were growing in the grasses, then people would have to offer up one of their wethers or castrated sheep as a punishment. So for a long time, daisy has been seen as
yeah, it was under siege.
yeah, completely.
It's interesting about what you're saying about like convincing Zeus not to throw thunderbolts, and I was thinking about that you were talking about how it like it can like stunt growth, like kind of in a helpful way.
Yeah.
So it's good for eclipses where people like move too far too fast. Also with all these aspects to like to Uranus, which can cause kind of like rapid unstable mutations. That in Uranus is very much like the tower card and operates kind of like a lightning bolt. Like the example I always give when people are having Uranus transits is like, you're going to be getting hit with this volatile energy. So if your kite is going to be struck by lightning, you should have a key attached to it that runs to a light bulb somewhere, you know, like, but that this daisy, like, you know, Zeus being kind of like out of control fecundity, you know, like this stunting growth and kind of preventing too much unstable mutation, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, daisy. Wearing daisy, making a daisy chain around.
Yeah, right, totally. Yeah, daisy chain, like being like distributing the energy to all your guitar pedals.
Exactly.
But I love all the names, like you listed, like Billy Button, Cow's Eye, Devil's Daisy, Thunder Daisy, Fair Maids of France, Ghouls, Grandmothers, Horse Blob is really good.
Really good.
Maudlin, Poverty Weed, and Rising Sun.
Moonflower too is another one of the names.
Oh wow! Also, Marguerite, right?
Yeah, after Saint Margaret.
Yeah. And so Culpepper has this one as being Cancer, but Cancer with Venus there. So that's perfect for this one.
Yeah, that is perfect. Yeah, and I like how the Oxeye Daisy will protect itself in a hot, dry environment by producing even more bitter, acrid juices.
Yeah.
You know, it's hot for the northern hemisphere, this hot month for Leo time, and you know, Cancer into Leo. Being able to make this acrid, bitter juice that will then like stimulate the digestive system, which will then be able to transform toxins or bring nutrients into our body and release what we don't need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is perfect for the eclipse season where we need to protect ourselves from extremes in general.
Yeah.
And also like the digestive system more with like K2. So I guess, can I tell my nasty story now?
Why would you ask me?
I'm asking for your advice. Okay, so like with K2, sometimes you'll get literal like bowel and feces and like diarrhea, like kind of stuff. But that since it's archetypal, you'll get that in general. You know, just kind of like feces stuff in general. And Capricorn, it's an earth sign. It's very material, and with like Capricorn and K2 and Pluto, it's like that blockage, you know? And I had a friend text me and say like, oh, this eclipse season is really gross. Like I got a summer flu and I stepped in dog shit with sandals on.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I got that text today, and like last night I had like, this is disgusting, but I had like the worst case of or really the only case, but an extreme case of constipation that I've never experienced before, you know? Like for whatever, it was like circumstantial, like I just ate too much gluten in the past week, and I think I might have like a mild gluten tolerance.
Yeah, a little allergy.
But it like, I've never experienced this before. It was definitely like ramped up by the like Capricorn, Saturn, Pluto, K2 situation where I just like, I don't know how graphic to get, but I like,
yeah.
I was
painful.
It was painful. It was
like to be graphic.
long.
It seemed like it happened for a long time.
Yeah, like Saturn time. It was like 2 hours of like trying to like move
just take
my
care
bowels.
Of the
And I literally at some point had to sort of like get on my like lower abdomen like area and like massage like stuff through, you know? And so that like, picking these multiple plants that relate to that part of the body is like really important. I think especially this time around, like, because we were also talking about like the past and history and hierarchy and structure and like kind of like the fourth house, like in the house system relating to the underworld. And, you know, if you root the fourth house into space, you turn to the north, you know, like the south, like the 10th house being where the midheaven is. You look to the south and look up, like to the sun at the top of the sky. So look to the fourth house, you turn around, and you see the like Polaris and the like primordial beasts of that part of the celestial sky, like dragons and bears, and then you look down to the earth, and you're like, and you kind of think about the center of the earth, and that's the fourth house, and that how that whole architecture is in the body is sort of related to the bowels. It's like the bowels of the earth. The excretory system where you leave life. You're like you're forced out of the physical.
Right.
A lot of interesting dreams coming in right now.
Yeah, so many crazy dreams
that do surrounding eclipse seasons in general. But yeah, I was definitely having some dreams about like following a bunch of like kind of wretched bear hunters down this like this crazy like ridgetop expanse to this kind of like super like kind of antique mall city of like valuables from the past. So it's like very like Hades, Capricorn, and then like meeting like mummies and deceased like pets and things like that there, and waking up sort of in like turmoil and being like, oh, it's a dream, and then having this like bowel situation the next morning or the next day, and just thinking about that whole structure of like the fourth house, the bowels, the underworld, like the northern sky, and I don't know, just kind of wanted to point that out, like and relate it back to what you're saying about like how you can use these planets. These plants medicinally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating in that way.
And also for eye support, they're all good for eye support.
Yeah. I thought it kept coming up, and I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. It's very important right now.
Some of the listeners don't know, like eclipses are really bad for the eyes. It's like both luminaries, like your right and left eye, like in being swallowed by shadow planets that are, that as flies molest us by rivers and marshes, like the nodes molest the sun and the moon, so your eyes are often compromised.
I think even forming, making a tea of 2 daisy flowers and then putting them on both of our eyes would be amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's amazing how it's transforming polluted soils that have been polluted with crude oil.
That's so crazy. There's just all these Oxeye daisies growing where there are cars, or like just beyond there. Yeah. And it's so I always just love the way they look, because their flowers are sort of substantial, considering like it's not like the stem is very simple and there's not like a ton of leaves on it, and so the flowers are just like seem like they're almost just like, if you pass by them, it's like almost like they're like suspended in the air, and I really love the way that they look, and so it's the only flower we had around here, and I had to clean up the Venus altar the other day, and I put some of those on it, and I was really excited then to read like what you wrote about it. I thought, oh well, I'm sure she's like, I'm sure she's grateful for it.
Yeah, and Culpepper agrees. He's like Venus and Cancer. Yeah. So because of that, he's like, it's really good for any ailments and wounds of the breast area. Mm-hmm. But he also says that it facilitates, like, and this is what I was talking about like they're watery, they're Cancerian plants, so they're not like, oh, let's dry out these watery problem areas, but it's like it facilitates wounds unhealed as watery humors, and if watery humors keep running into them, like if you're like, oh, this like wound won't dry out, it's just like the watery humors are just like fungal rot or something, like or like a what do you call it, like athlete's foot kind of thing, like foot fungus or something. Like something that just remains raw, but that it also helps eyes that keep running, like watery eyes, you know. But yeah, I thought that toning quality was really interesting. And like you're saying, like with like crude oil, you know, like that is, it's so Hades, you know, like where it's Hades is like Pluto, you know, is like Pluto can't, like the Pluto Saturn South Node thing, and then Pluto Hades, like Hades being like the lord of treasures because like metal and gems were found under the earth. But in this dream that I had, I realized, oh yeah, also things from the past are valuable just by being old, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then crude oil is something found under the earth, you know. So it's one of the most like, and it's dark and black and hidden. It's one of the most like, and all the power and manipulation around it. It's the words crude oil are almost like synonymous with Pluto.
Yeah.
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 It's giving us so much like inability to see clearly, and that that you know that like boy girl boy girl boy girl, like loves me not, that like binary thing. It's kind of like the fork in the road, you know, that so many clients right now they're like have this choice, you know, we're like, oh, I could do this, or not really a choice. They're just like, I want to quit this job, but because it's unfulfilling, you know, the cancer end of it. But I don't know what's going to happen after I quit it, and I won't have any security. It's like totally like the Saturn Pluto. Pluto, I don't know. Saturn, lack of security. K2, like reducing. You know, like Daisy is such a good choice in that sense that it's like, well, just remove one of the you know, one of the roads off the binary of the fork. You know.
Yeah. It's interesting how Daisy will grow in some wet areas, but Daisy is more growing. It can grow in pretty dry areas.
Yeah.
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 I love
it. What's that?
Yeah, purple Loosestrife is like completely round, and
Yeah.
it can be so. But they
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
this ability, a similar ability in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, Culpepper says it tempers the heat of choler and refreshes the liver. So it's like it has some sort of relationship to drying and preventing things from overheating, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it knows how to live in that heat too. You know, knows
Yeah.
how to live successfully in that environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like what do we do with crude oil? But like we light it on fire, you know? It's like we ignite it, you know? So
Yeah.
it's that like with Uranus kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Saint?
Or is there anything else
yeah.
that you want
Do you
to
want to talk
say
about Daisy more?
I just want to just say that it's really fitting with the whole excretory system, fourth house too, because of the excretory system ability to assimilate, decipher what are nutrients and what are toxins, or what needs to stay and what needs to leave, which feels really eclipsean too, and the excretory zone. So Daisy's ability to, even its flower essence, being able to assimilate information, like what do I need to take in, what do I not need to take in.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some from last year, and we got to take a drop of it before our chat. I was excited to have it on hand, and then also like use it considering what you had written about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that makes sense that it refreshes the liver then, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, oh, hey, like I can like restart the liver here so that we know what's what, you know, and that it like, if it can clear out, like if it can help with eyes that are running and where like we can't see correctly because of over emotions, like say like someone who's crying or teary eyed, you know, that it can return sight to the person that is overwhelmed by the watery humors, you know?
Yeah, and in traditional Chinese medicine, the liver and the eyes are completely connected.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as a Venusian herb, it's also, Culpepper talks about how it's also good for the secret parts, like, but also like the mouth, the tongue, and the secret parts, which are all very like moist areas, like, I think he's talking about ulcers and kernels and nobules and stuff. I think he's talking about like herpes, basically, and venereal disease, But those are symptomatic of being overly passionate, being like too in love, like that, like going too far with the Venusian.
Shall we move on to St. John's Wort then?
Yeah.
So yeah, right, around here, this is it. St. John's Wort just started blooming because we're 2 weeks late. Usually it blooms around St. John's Day, late June, well, sometimes early July. But
Last year, I think we got it perfect. We got like the St. John and the peony, which is also rooted to that time period, were like totally present on the solstice, but they're so late, the wet, cold spring.
Yeah. And and how tea also is associated with midsummer as well. But yeah, so St. John's Wort, Hypericum perforatum, Hypericum meaning hyper icon, like over an icon or over an appellation, seeing almost like its ability to dispel malevolent spirits, which today we call depression or seasonal affective disorder. And then perforatum, it has tiny little holes in the leaves. That's really a nice signature ability to ID the plant. If you kind of hold up the leaves and see these tiny little holes. Another name is called hundred holes. I think that also it was said maybe the devil was so angry at St. John's Wort for warding off his work that he poked hundreds of holes in the leaves of St. John's Wort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's why he did it. Like I saw that like St. John's Wort like curse the devil, and I saw that it was like something called like Devil's Needle, but I didn't realize that like he had done it because he was thwarted,
The story, yeah. But yeah, it's almost like stained glass, but it's real. It's the oil glands, the hypericin, which is one of the strong medicines of St. John's Wort. I'm a whole plant medicine herbalist, so I don't necessarily say that you take that constituent out, you take the whole plant, but
right.
it's interesting. At any rate, yeah, so St. John's Wort is a completely protective plant. Has been used as St. John wore a belt of wormwood, but also had St. John's Wort as a protection. Most people around midsummer will harvest a bundle of St. John's Wort and take the old one out from last year and hang in the house St. John's Wort bundles to protect the house for the whole year. Carrying them on one's being, part of the 7 herbs that would protect anyone from anything supernatural or otherworldly, along with vervain, speedwell, eyebright, mallow, yarrow, and self-heal. And of course, we could probably translate purple loosestrife for eyebright if we needed to.
Yeah, which is interesting that like the other 2 plants like support the eyes physically and directly, and that with St. John's Wort, it's a very common, especially in the UK and UK lore, to be protective against the evil eye.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, it's really interesting about the hyper icon, from the Greek, which sort of means like over picture, you know, and then that it's like where the, like you were saying, the like red pigment that comes out of it, that will stain your hands like blood, and like they even scientifically now call like hypericin, and that it's, you know, it's like in the medieval times they called it like fuga demonium, like, which basically means like make spirits flee. And like we were saying, like Hieronymus Bach said it makes the devil violent in his herbal that he wrote, and that Paracelsus would say that it chases away phantasmata, you know, which he's basically talking about like perhaps like deliriums and lunacies, being a lunatic, or more of this like overly emotional, you know, even like the delirium of love potions they would talk about, you know, like, oh, you've been enchanted with this, that movie that came out recently, The Love Witch.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
if all those guys just were carrying St. John's Wort, you know, they would have been fine. You know this movie, Suzanne?
No, I don't.
I forget the director's name, but it's like it appears to be completely in place in the early 70s or late 60s, and then you see like a modern Volvo eventually, and then by the end people are on cell phones, you know, and then you're like, oh, this is like kind of making fun of a lot of things. Speaking of like decades, like 70s, 80s, 90s, things being retro and coming back around, and there being like a whole cult of that, and being able to like structure a whole identity around that, you know, like.
I think the director's name is Anna Biller.
Anna Biller.
Yeah.
Like
Anna Biller, yeah.
it's like it's like this woman who is using like some what does she use, like mandrake on this one guy, and then he has like, she's like some
She just makes these potions.
Yeah. But there's like a tropane alkaloid that she uses that then he has like the sweats and has like eventually a heart attack or something, and then, but doing all these things that are kind of like sort of, how would you say, like kind of like witchcraft 101, but taking them to this level that's diabolical, you know, like
because he's like killing these men.
Wow.
She's making them overly emotional. It's not a great movie.
Yeah, she does make them overly emotional.
And she's like disgusted by their emotion.
And
she's just like, I think she just wants like sex, and so she's just, I don't know.
She's confusing sex and love. Like it's very like Venus and Cancer, and then if like everyone in the movie just had some St. John's Wort and Daisy, they'd probably be okay, you know.
Wouldn't
be protected from psychic attack, you know. In that, like, the other plants are support the eyes and support like the bowels and the lower digestive system. This is like against evil eye, but also is protects against E. coli. So it's almost like the same. It's not like directly on the body system, but the thing that would affect the body system, you know.
And a wonderful, it's a warrior herb, which is wonderful, I think, for Mars and Leo to kind of have a guiding luminary.
Right, totally. To have like the general in the house with like, or the king in the house with the general or whatever.
Yeah, like probably when the sun comes into Leo too, it'll be really.
Oh yeah.
Supportive of
that. And so getting into the St. John Wort now kind of is like a good foreshadowing for the planets moving into Leo later in August.
Yeah, completely. But really also great nervous system support, a great nervine, and pain relief. Anything that's kind of affecting the nervous system, any kind of pain on the nerve endings.
But it's interesting that like that like it has like a hypnagogic, like kind of entheogenic like effect, like when you're hypnagogic, not like when you're falling asleep and before you get into like narrative disassociative dream mode. Like you see all these patterns and patterns of lights, and that's where you start getting triggered, like short phrases and flash images and things like that. That's like the hypnagogic state, as you experience on the way in, as you're dozing off. And that a lot of that comes from starting to project concepts and ideas on and into the light patterns that are coming from the nerves on the back of your eye socket, so that it soothes the nerves, but it also, they say, like, how do I say this? Like, it sort of structures and affects that, like, the randomness of those light patterns. So then, almost like, when you're falling asleep on a psychedelic, it clearly affects like how you see your inner eye, But that St. John's Wort also does that, and that it kind of like it brings that to a little bit of a lighter mood, like less dark images tend to and how it also has like photosensitivity, like it literally makes you experience things more lightening way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I know people who take St. John's Wort from October through May.
Yeah.
It's a kind of lightener of the winter lack of light, bringing the sunshine in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah, which is crazy that a red pigment comes from it, and it's like the light we get from the sun has that, like, I mean, we get some of the spikes of like the blue light, but it's in the context of the sun, solar red light. That's the opposite of what we get from like our computer screens and things like that. Now that I'm staring at the computer screen right now, I'm actually staring at the word red pigment on the computer screen, like forward. Maybe even just the word red, like invoking St. John's Wort can help. But yeah, really, really interesting, like physical and metaphysical effects. It's like how it is used in storm stopping and in weather magic as well.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting that it's like that it's like the sun. I thought of that as like the sun being kind of the centerpiece of like how the seasons flow, and St. John's Wort being like a midsummer or like a solstice herb, and that is the time, at least in this world, where it initiates like thunderstorm season,
Yeah.
Being able to like through the solar clock, like reference out of you're trying to bring rain or stop rain, like you can just imagine using the sun as like a slider around the seasonal clock to like set it where you want,
Yeah, completely.
There's just so much there with St. John's Wort, like the devil punctures thing, like all the being almost like sunspots, like the signature of the sun is so strong,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's also amazing how St. John's Wort is an amazing ally for first and second and third degree burns.
Yeah.
Wonderful healer, and helps in scarring and keeps infection from coming in, which is from too much heat. So that's pretty fascinating. It also has that ability to assist sunburns or really extreme burns.
And it's crazy that like sheep and goats and they eat it, they graze on it and browse on it, and then they become so photosensitive that they get burns and they get like bloated and by the sun, But then it also like is helpful. It like can cause you to burn and then help you from burns.
I love that.
Yeah, plants often have that spectrum, which I think we have too, with like our strengths and our weaknesses are really a spectrum, and then
right. Certain plants will be a sedative and an upper, depending on the dosage.
how you take it or when, or, yeah.
That's very much like, it's so similar. It's so similar to the sun in so many ways, because like you need to get outside and get the sun on your skin to have vitamin D and to be have vitality, but you can easily become burned. You know, it's like you're dealing with something that's easy enough to strategize around, but is essentially dangerous. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how St. John's Wort really helps with one's inner sun too. It's like keeping that kind of vital force flowing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so much interesting stuff. Well, I think we could probably go on about these plants and about everything else indefinitely, but maybe we should bring this to a close. Do we have anything we want to touch on?
I think we just have to remember that there are some caveats with St. John's Wort if you're taking it internally. People who are taking antidepressant medication should not take St. John's Wort.
Oh, interesting.
St. John's Wort sometimes is so good at getting toxins out of our body that it will see that as a toxin.
Oh, wow.
And so that's very much something very important for someone who wants to call upon St. John's Wort and should talk to their physician if they're wanting to. It just wouldn't be their ally. A flower essence would be more the way to go.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when you remediate Saturn and you're like, if someone has a lot of Saturn work to do and you're like, oh yeah, you should start hanging out with old people and start, getting a really disciplined meditation practice going, and you should think about fasting and alone more, being silent, and it like you can concoct like a recipe for depression for someone who already has a debilitated Saturn, and then like so it's good to balance that with solar work. But if you just did all solar work, you could get out of control on that, like kind of confident bragging, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Yeah.
But kind of, and so that's really important, I think, in all of the astrology of right now that we're talking about, where we have like solar eclipses and Saturn conjunct eclipses. This like how much Saturn and how much Sun to use, and figuring out what the equilibrium is. So for someone, it's an interesting example for someone that is taking antidepressants and this solar herb kind of trying to like remove all the toxins to the point where their antidepressants are ineffective and then they're depressed. It's just like about like what's the mix.
Yeah, and in that case, bring St. John's Wort into your house and have it in flower vases, or just we don't always have to take the plant in, or just carry a picture, or just got like vision, go in a vision event, like visionary vision with St. John's Wort, something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's like a perfect ally. It's about like the astrology in general right now being like the Cancer eclipses and the Capricorn eclipses and Saturn's involvement and Pluto's involvement, pointing out like, oh, in our own lives and then in the world at large, there's a lot of like really serious, heavy things that have to be dealt with, and it's kind of like, okay, no more fucking around, time to actually deal with this. And so that's like facing a lot of heavy stuff, and then on the Cancer end being like, yeah, I know it's going to be really emotional dealing with this, but how upset do we actually need to get? It might be more effective if we just get excited about finally dealing with it. And getting on the other side of it. And that seems to be like part of what we're going to experience with all the planets moving into Leo after that. We're like, oh, it feels so good to deal with this. Like, you know, to deal with like things as crazy and fucked up as like the border issues in the, you know, the southern border of America, or like reports of like, oh yeah, we have 12 years before we have to, if we don't do anything about climate change in 12 years, that's kind of just like done, you know, like all these things that are really urgent. It's like, okay, yeah, no, we have to actually look at this and change our lives and stop nostalgic for previous life patterns. But that doesn't mean to go into depression mode. It's like we need to seek like vitality, you know?
Yeah.
Really fantastic choices.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for being on another episode of Liminal Light.
Yeah. Really great.